Hello, I'm Greg EG.IdrA Fields, and this is a Razer Academy replay analysis. Today we'll be looking at how to play aggressive air versus air mid-game against Protoss player against Dignitas playing.
So on the top right we have Dignitas Bling as the red Protoss, and the bottom left we have me, EG.IdrA, as the blue Zerg. And this game will be a demonstration of air versus air PvZ. This is becoming quite popular in the current metagame. Skytoss does seem to be the way for Protoss to go. They do have mid-game timings. Mothership Core Recall does give the ability to poke pretty much without punishment in the mid-game. Just look for an opening in the Zerg player and recall if they happen to be caught by too big of an army. Only problem with this is if the Mothership Core gets targeted down. So that's the only thing they really have to worry about. And as long as they can prevent that from happening, they're in very good shape. But if you do want to go to the late game, as Mothership's Vortex has been removed from the game, or nerfed so much that it's become inconsequential, there is no real ground-based counter to Broodlord Infestor. It pretty much just destroys anything on the ground for Protoss. However, Protoss Air has received several buffs with the whole new unit in the Tempest, which is a great siege breaker. Completely outranges anything in the Zerg arsenal, and also I think 3 or 4 shots Broodlords kills Broodlords very, very quickly. There's also the buff to carriers in that their interceptors are no longer on. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but their interceptors can now fly further away from the actual blimps, giving them a longer effective range if you control them very well. Void Rays also got the manual charge ability, where they no longer have to be charged up on units. They can actually just be turned up to high power against armored at any given time. This makes them incredibly powerful against corruptors if used correctly. And then Phoenix, of course, got the slight range buff. So Protoss Air in general has gotten incredibly powerful, and is most definitely the way to go in the late game. So more and more Protosses are trying to figure out how to get there safely. Bling, I feel, is one of the smarter players in that he just kind of forgoes the ground army. He uses the ground army merely as a crutch to get up to enough bases to support the air army. Whereas from the Zerg side of things, most Zergs, including myself, are playing in such a way where they just try and take advantage of their very powerful mid-game relative to the Protosses to do pretty much game-ending damage, to at least prevent a 4th base just with their lair take units. And in some cases it was a swarm host, depending on the opening in the map mainly, and in some cases it's mutas. In this game I will show how to go muta play, recognize that your opponent is going air, and then how to deal with that from there. Because the thing is, if Phoenix are masked, they do eventually end up countering Mutalisks. You just have to get enough of them. You hit some kind of critical ratio, and particularly if you get the Phoenix range upgrade at the fleet beacon. So at that point, mutas are obsolete, and a lot of Zerg players will then try and go Infestors to either catch the Phoenix in a fungal and allow the Mutalisks to kill them off, or just to transition into Hive Tech. However, in Hearthstone that doesn't work nearly as well because Broodlord Infestor against Tempest-based airplay is just not that good. The Tempest can pick you off from outside of range. And as long as they have good Templar support, you're not going to be able to get Vipers into range to actually abduct any of the important units, because they will just feedback you the moment you try and fly forward. So as long as the Protoss is patient enough and they build up a Tempest, like a Tempest air-heavy army, they will eventually whittle you down because of the range of the Tempest and the efficiency of their units in a straight-up battle. So the proper way to do this, in my opinion, is to actually switch over to Corruptor production and then overrun them on the ground. Because as we'll see in this game, that in order to get that very powerful air army, you do sacrifice quite a bit on the ground. And this allows heavily upgraded Zerglings and also Banelings to actually overwhelm them just in terms of ground army, which allows you to focus on Corruptors simply to hold their air at bay while you deny their economy on the ground, and then head up towards just kind of an overwhelming economy, wear them down very inefficiently against the air with Corruptors and Hydras and whatnot. But your main goal is really to just prevent that 4th base. The 4th base is where Protoss really starts to secure enough economy to go both mass air with enough Templar support to feedback both Infestors and Vipers, and storm any Hydras or Corruptors that attempt to engage the air army. If you can deny that 4th base, then it takes them a very long time to get the critical mass of units, and in that time you can secure 5 to 6 bases yourself, get up to Hive Tech, have enough units that you can actually just afford to trade with them until you whittle down the super army. So here, early game, nothing particularly consequential happens. He is going to do a little bit of gateway pressure, and I was talking to him about this. He said this is actually in response to the current HOTS metagame. A lot of Korean Zergs are going kind of risky 3-base Hydra builds, where they actually just skip the Roach Warren entirely, go straight up to Hydralisks, and then attempt to do a Hydra timing to punish the popularity of Stargate openings. And Stargate openings are most popular because in my opinion they are the best. Phoenix, great for harass. Oracle, if it's a surprise, can be very good, but I feel it is the weakest of the options. And Void Ray's very good defensively, and potentially for harass. Some Void Ray assisted Warp Gate all-ins are powerful enough that you have to worry about those should you know that your opponent's opening Stargate. So, in response to this, a lot of Korean Protosses are opening up, Korean Zergs are opening up with heavy Hydralisk-based play. And for that reason, Bling has been experimenting with this very quick +1 4-gate pressure, as if you don't actually get any roaches, it's almost impossible to deal with this efficiently. But if we look at the production tab, I am indeed, well, I haven't started them yet, but I am indeed playing a roach-based style of play, or at least a roach-based opening. This is because I feel that 2-base all-ins ZvP are still very, very dangerous, at least as dangerous as Wings of Liberty, if not more so. Because Zerg's early game didn't get that much better, Burrow doesn't really help in these situations, and Overlord speed does help you recognize it, but does not really help you defend it. And Protoss, having all these same builds, plus the addition of Time Stop, or Time Warp, whatever it's called, the Mothership Core ability, which simply makes them much, much more powerful. So I've still been opening up with pretty defensive Roachling, and then transitioning into my lair tag of choice, either Mutas, occasionally Hydras should the situation call for it, and often Swarm Hosts. So here we can see just continue warping units, continue to produce Roachling. This is a normal little, very easy to understand trade. I'm just producing units until I believe that I've completely held the attack off, and then I will go and drone up. The only key at this point in the game is figuring out when exactly you need to stop producing units. You want to make as few as possible. As Protoss, with the use of force fields and sentries and whatnot, it's very, very efficient defensively. So more often than not, you're not really going to be able to just run across the map and kill them should this fail. And unless they fail miserably, you have a ton of units left over and they waste a lot of very expensive units. You're not going to be able to go kill them. So you don't really want to continue making units after you've held off the rush. And so for that reason, you see me slipping in an extra few drones every once in a while. I know that I don't have to make full unit production at all times to stop this rush. He's only warping in 4 units at a time, and I've held it off quite efficiently. I have speedlings now, so his stalkers can't continue to infinitely kite me. Unfortunately, we see he did warp in around a units before he recalled. That was actually very intelligent by him. I thought he was going to continue the rush for a little bit longer, so I made another round of units. Whereas, in fact, he did just pull back immediately, and he did not really lose too much there, where I burned a lot of larvae. We see I only have 8 drones mining this right now. I'm going into full drone production mode. But however, I did have this Overlord here. I see he didn't take the 3rd base. He didn't even start a pylon yet, so he has no cannons there. So I am going to go and try and counterattack. When you make this many units, you do have to try and get something out of them. However, as you saw there, I was going up, I was checking around for pylons to make sure that he didn't get off a warp in as my army was across the map, because I don't intend to make any more units right now, so I'm not going to have any kind of defensive units as I'm pressuring this. Unfortunately, I did miss this pylon, so that's going to come back to hurt me later. But we see that he was going up to Robo, as well as going to Stargate behind that, so he was not able to hold on to that 3rd Nexus. My units did manage to cancel that very easily, and as I said, you always do need to go in and poke when you make that many units. Make sure you're safe at home defensively, make sure there's not a warp prism coming, there's no pylons anywhere, or anything like that. But you do need to take the opportunity to try and do damage, because had he gotten away with that 3rd Nexus uncontested that early in the game, along with all the tech paths he's doing, I would have been in a lot of trouble. It would have been very hard for me to actually do anything after that, because he would do so much damage to me, as we'll see in a second here, and at the same time getting up his own economy. And you cannot allow that as a Zerg player. So here, unfortunately, that probe I missed is putting up a pylon. We're going to see the effects of that. Also, I do not have great Overlord spread. The reason for this is so many Protosses have been opening air that I just feel it's not worth it to have a bunch of Overlords out there watching anymore. It's great to have that Overlord perimeter. It can save you a lot. However, with Phoenix flying around, losing 5 to 6 Overlords for free, it just happens way too frequently, and it really, really hurts when it does happen. So here we see he is immediately going in and targeting down that hatchery. However, because he is teching, he only has 4 gateways. He was only able to send in 4 cells, and I will just barely save that hatchery. And at the same time, he's warping into the main, harassing a lot, actually targeting down the lair, and also coming out with a bunch of Phoenix. However, I have my Mutas pop so that I can chase them off for the time being. Will also allow me to shoot down the warp prism, and this lair survives as well. So a little bit questionable decision making by him there, actually just going for the lair instead of any more fragile buildings, such as maybe even this hatchery, but the spawning pool, or my drones, just anything really. So here coming in, killing off the pylon, and so he hasn't actually done too much tangible damage with this. It has forced me to produce units, kind of thrown off my multitasking and whatnot, delayed the establishment of this base. But at the same time, he did get up his third base, which he otherwise would not have been able to do. If we look at this army, it's really not that substantial. I would have been able to overrun that. However, his harassment did force my army back into my main base to defend. And here we see the effects of that 2-star Phoenix. And this is actually not a very good situation for me. We see how many mutas I have, how many Phoenix he has. He could easily overwhelm me in an air versus air battle. I'm going to lose that queen. I kind of engaged with my mutas just to scare him off there. If he really wanted to be aggressive, he could continue to push it. However, he chooses not to. And so this is the situation where I was talking about. When I recognize that my opponent is dedicating to air, when I see that many Phoenix, when you see more than 5 or 6 really, that is a pretty good indication. So I start mixing in corruptors. I'm getting my air upgrades as well. And you'll also see that I start setting myself up for Ling Baneling. I have a second Evo chamber to go for double upgrades on the ground. Double upgrades on the ground, very important, as that allows you to fight efficiently or more than efficiently against Zealots. Also, the Baneling Nest. I will start those upgrades as soon as I feel I can afford more gas. For the time being, I'm just continuing Corruptor production so I can feel safe in the air versus air battles, so the Phoenix can't continue to harass. And here we see he is moving out to take his 4th base, and the 4th base, as I said, is the very, very important thing. The other thing is that you're going to be denying the 4th base on the ground. The air battle is relatively small until Protoss gets up to a high void ray count, because as long as they just have a few void ray plus Phoenix, you can kind of just sit under them and fight the ground versus ground army, ground versus ground battle, and win that regardless of air. So there, the reason I went in was to actually take out the Phoenix. Banelings, very, very efficient against any Protoss ground army if they do not have sentries. So while that was not an efficient trade there, I did manage to take out a lot of his sentries, and I do have a higher economy than him, so I can replace units much more quickly than he can. So taking out those sentries then allows me to run in with Banelings and be much more efficient later on, thus making up for the bad trade earlier. And here, continuing to run around with Phoenix, I still have a bunch of Corruptors in my army, and I'm keeping those mutas alive. The mutas deal a ton of damage if he's actually forced to engage, and the range of the Corruptors prevents him from dancing around with his Phoenix and hitting me from outside of range. Here, taking up a 5th base, and again, keeping my army out on the map and active. That 4th base, as I said, is just the absolute crux of this game. Putting up 3rd and 4th Stargates as he commits more and more to air. We also see that he is getting air upgrades. Well, not yet. Now getting air upgrades. Something he really should have been doing sooner. He was obviously committing to air from the start of this game. Should have just accepted that and gone air upgrades right from the start. And so here's that first engagement. And as we see, the Void Rays and the Phoenix are easily going to win this air battle, but at the same time I'm just absolutely running over his ground army. There's nothing you can do about that. And if we watch the Void Rays try and kill the Zerglings, they're not actually that efficient at it. I'm actually just going to take out this Nexus while sitting under him. At the same time, he's lost track of his Phoenix. He's taking kind of a bad fight there, last couple of them. And so he's slowly picking away at these Zerglings, but trading a few Zerglings for a Nexus is more than well worth it for me at this point. He just does not have very much economy to speak of at this point. He cannot continue continue to produce air at the rate that he really needs to keep up with me, as I'm taking a 5th base and just continuing to grow. So here we see he's continuing to go around and try and harass. It's a good move by him, however, he is losing a couple of Phoenix, and he really wants to keep those alive, because he wants to spend all of his Stargate time on Void Rays right now. And given that I have 5 bases, 6 hatcheries, I can reproduce those drones almost instantly. It's not really worth it to trade a few Phoenix for drones, even for a lot of drones at this point. And so now we see that because of that commitment to air, he only has about 6-7 gateways running, and he can't even afford to produce them constantly. So he's left with just a handful of Zealots. He lost the core of his ground army during that initial fight, and he's never going to be able to rebuild it. So just every time I attack, I'm going to win the ground army, ground battle decisively. And we see his Void Rays are again just going to continue to absolutely destroy my Corruptors, but I'm okay with that until he hits a critical amount of Void Rays where he can actually get aggressive. And should he go on to my creep and push in towards my reinforcements here, I would be able to win that air versus air battle. He knows that, so he's going to sit back and he's going to try and secure a 4th base still. But obviously, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm just going to keep putting the pressure on and keep his ground army small so he can never secure that base. And then eventually I will switch into Corruptor Hydralisk in order to win the final air versus air battle. So at this point, he has to sit back, and just try and get a bunch more units built up. But again, he's investing so much gas in his air army, and he just doesn't have that many resources in general to put into anything. Trying to put up a Templar archives, but really just cannot afford that either. Continually denying the 4th base, making sure he's never going to be able to get up that scary army. And even if he does get the scary amount of Void Rays, he's kind of getting to that point, but he does not have the support units that he needs to really make them that effective. So there again, you see me sacrificing a portion of my Grand Army just to take out those cells. Very important to never allow him to get up base of Grand Army. The important point here is just continually to attack, to always be attacking your opponent. Never let them get comfortable and build up. Because if they do get that core sentries going, then they'll be able to force field off your ground units. Their Void Rays become much more effective. If they do get some Templar up, then obviously Storm or Archon is very powerful. The more air units you get, the better they are. Clearly, you saw what the Void Rays were doing to Corruptors in the previous battles. So you really can't let Protoss sit and get comfortable, particularly because of cannons. If they set up a defensive position, if they actually let that Nexus finish and you get the Planetary Nexus plus cannons, then that becomes a very strong defensive position. And if Protoss ever establishes a defensive position where they're comfortable, then they can get up to that super army, and I really don't feel that Zerg can efficiently beat it. We'll even see here in the coming battles. Again, I'm going to deny his 4th base, but I'm just going to get absolutely destroyed in the air despite having this many reasonably well upgraded Corruptors. So we see he does now have carriers as well, and he's heading up towards a good composition, which is very Void Ray heavy with carrier and Tempest support, as well as Templar on the ground. He obviously cannot afford to mix in the Tempests or very many carriers because he, again, does not have much economy. So there, the 4th base has been denied again, and I'm not even going to try to... Well, here we see him running away, trying to get better engagement. Good storms. Corruptors, obviously air units, very difficult to keep them constantly spread out. And we see just how quickly the Void Rays actually do damage to the Corruptors. While charged, the Corruptors just melt while trying to engage. But back at home, I am starting Hydralist production. Hydra's still not particularly good units versus a lot of Protoss compositions, and even against the air armies, they can be kind of fragile. However, if you do manage to put your opponent all in on an air army, then Corruptor Hydra can hold it off, just in a defensive posture. So the key is, again, putting Protoss into that all-in position where you just deny their economies for so long that they feel like they have to go and attack you. So once again, trying to take that 4th base. Again, I'm going to have to go deny it. And we see the ground upgrades at 2-2. Very important to get those upgrades. You do need your ground units to be more efficient than his because you do have to be winning those ground battles. And now I'm just looking to sit back and kind of build up a little bit. Or, well, not really sit back, but to build up a little bit more. I'm taking a 6th base. I'm heading up towards Hive. I'm moving into my late game where I feel like I can actually start attacking them. And here we see just how effective Storm is against Hydraling. And also the Void Rays versus the Corruptors just destroying everything. You can imagine how effective this would be had Protoss been able to secure an economy and was running at full production. And that is the reason why I feel like you have to be so aggressive against the Protoss in the mid-game. We see just how efficient they can be. You really can't afford to fight against that when they have an economy to back it up. However, we see in production he is 2 Void Rays, I am 36 Hydralists. That is the difference in the game, is the actual just the ability to produce. He is going to be way more efficient in these trades than I am, but I cannot produce him. So that is really my approach to beating Protoss at the time, or for the time being. And here we can see the attack. The Void Rays just dealing a ton of damage, eating through everything, but slowly falling. And again, more and more Hydras in production for me, whereas he cannot afford to produce pretty much anything. 5 Zealots, which are ultimately going to be pretty useless. So more Hydras come in, start target firing down the Void Rays as there's less and less of them. They fall one by one, and that will be the end of it. And so we see that even though his units are very powerful, just with no economy to fall back on, there's not too much he can do, and I do eventually wear him down. The Zerglings come in here and trapping the Templar. Just a cute little move there. Not particularly important. And he's forced GG.
So that was how to keep the pressure on your Protoss opponent win air versus air ZvP. This has been a Razer Academy replay analysis. Thank you for watching. I'm Razer Academy Replay Analysis. Today we'll be looking at a macro storm host style versus a Korean pro gamer LGIM first.
Here we have me, EG.IdrA, as the blue Zerg in the bottom left, and LGIM first as the red Protoss in the top right. I'm not entirely sure this is the actual first, however, it's most likely a Korean pro gamer, and there's a pretty good chance it's him, as there's a lot of Korean pro gamers playing on the Heart of the Storm ladder right now using their real IDs.